The sun was cruel, burning without mercy over the endless desert. Two alien sisters sat trapped inside a rusted iron cage, their thin bodies pressed against the hot bars. The younger sister, Lyra, shivered even though the heat was unbearable. Her small hands clutched the wrist of her older sister, Sarah. The cage had been left in the middle of nowhere. No shade, no water, no sign of life, only sand stretching to every horizon. Sarah tried to stay strong for her little sister. She brushed away the dust from Lyra's hair, whispering softly that help would come. Her voice cracked as she spoke. Her lips dry and broken, but she forced a smile. Lyra's golden eyes were full of tears. "No one will come," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They left us here to die." Sarah pulled her close. "Don't say that. I will not let you die. Not while I still breathe." The desert was silent except for the sharp cry of a distant bird circling above. Every now and then, the wind moved the sand in thin waves, rattling against the cage like dry bones. The sisters could hear their own breathing, shallow and weak, their stomachs aching from hunger. They had been trapped for 2 days. Their captors had abandoned them when the chain broke on their transport wagon, leaving them behind like useless animals. Sarah thought of escape again and again, but the lock was thick. The bars were strong even with rust. Her claws had scratched until they bled, her hands swollen and raw. The cage mocked them, strong enough to hold 2 starving girls. The desert mocked them, stretching wide as if swallowing all hope. Lyra leaned against her sister's shoulder, her voice no more than a whisper. "Sarah, I don't want to die here." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, hiding her tears. "You will not," she said, though even she was losing faith. Her heart ached with guilt. She should have fought harder. She should have protected Lyra from being taken. But all her strength had been crushed under the weight of chains and the laughter of raiders. The hours dragged, the sun sank lower, and the sky turned from burning blue to bleeding orange. The air cooled, but their thirst grew sharper. Their bodies trembling from weakness, Lyra lay curled beside her sister, her breath shallow, her eyelids heavy. Sarah stroked her hair and hummed an old lullaby from their home world, her voice weak yet gentle. Each note carried sorrow, a song for a child who deserved safety but found only pain. Just when the night was about to fall, Sarah heard something. At first she thought it was the wind again, the shifting of sand across the dunes, but this sound was heavier, steady, like weight pressing against the earth. Her heart raced, she held her breath, straining to listen. Footsteps, her eyes widened, her claws tightened around the bars. The sound grew closer, slow but certain, each step crunching against the dry ground. She shook Lyra awake, her voice trembling. "Listen, do you hear it?" The little one blinked, confused, then her ears twitched, catching the sound too. Her golden eyes grew wide with fear. "It's them, the raiders. They've come back." Sarah felt a cold wave of dread, but something inside her refused to give in. The steps were alone, not many, not the loud march of a group, but the single sound of one walker. She pressed her face to the bars, trying to see through the settling dust. At first only the horizon moved, the dying sun painting long shadows. Then a figure appeared, blurred at first by heat and sand. It was tall, shoulders broad, carrying something long across its back. As it stepped closer, Sarah saw the outline more clearly. Her breath caught in her throat. It was not one of the raiders. It was not alien, it was a human. Lyra gasped and clutched her sister's arm. "What if he kills us?" Sarah did not answer, her mind frozen, her heart thundering. The human walked slowly, his heavy boots leaving deep prints in the dust. He stopped only a few steps away from the cage. For a long moment, silence filled the air, broken only by the moan of the wind. The sisters stared, waiting for cruelty, waiting for laughter, waiting for another punishment. But the human only looked at them, his eyes unreadable, his face shadowed by the falling sun. His hand moved to his belt. Pulling out a flask, he raised it slowly. Then crouched near the cage, the sisters held their breath, their hearts caught between fear and hope. The desert seemed to vanish, time itself slowing down. And then the human spoke, his voice low but steady. "Do you need water?" Sarah froze, her mouth dry, her body trembling. She could not believe the words. Lyra stared at the flask with desperate eyes, and for the first time since their capture, something other than fear filled the cage, hope. The human knelt near the cage, his shadow stretching long across the sand as the last light of the sun dipped behind the dunes. His face was covered in dust, his beard rough, his eyes sharp but not cruel. The flask in his hand glimmered in the fading light, and the sisters stared at it as if it held the stars themselves. Their throats burned, their lips cracked, their bodies weak from thirst. Yet they hesitated, unsure if this was a trick. Sarah narrowed her eyes, her arms wrapped tightly around Lyra, her voice low and warning. "Why help us?" The human tilted his head, his voice steady. "Because you are dying, and I cannot walk past death." Lyra reached forward through the bars, her fingers trembling, her golden eyes wide with desperate need. The human uncorked the flask and poured carefully into her small hands, the water cool, glistening, falling like a miracle from another world. She drank quickly, choking and coughing, but smiling through her tears as the taste of life touched her tongue. Sarah watched closely, her claws still gripping the bars. "Who are you?" she asked, suspicion strong in her voice. The human only gave a small shrug. "A traveler?" Nothing more. Then he turned his gaze toward the cage, his expression tightening as he examined the lock, the rust, the heavy chains. He pressed his fingers against the metal, testing its strength, then pulled a tool from his pack, a jagged piece of steel shaped like a crowbar. He wedged it into the lock and began to push, the sound of grinding metal echoing into the night. The sisters exchanged a glance, fear mixing with fragile hope. They had seen humans before, but never like this, never stopping to give instead of taking. The raiders who captured them had laughed at their tears, mocked their weakness, called them worthless. But this man was different. His silence heavy, his actions careful, his eyes showing something their people rarely saw. Mercy. The lock resisted, sparks flying as the human forced the steel deeper. Lyra leaned forward, her small hands pressed to the bars, whispering, "Is he real, sister, or just a dream?" Sarah tightened her hold on her, whispering back, "Dreams do not bring water, Lyra. This is real." Her voice cracked, her heart trembling, as she fought the fear that still whispered it was a trick, that he would leave once he had played with their hope. The human grunted as he pushed harder, sweat beading his brow. Finally, with a sharp crack, the rusted lock gave way, the chain falling to the sand with a heavy thud. The door creaked open, its sound like the song of freedom long forgotten. The sisters froze, staring at the opening. Neither daring to move, the human stepped back, lifting his hand toward the night sky, his meaning clear: go, run, breathe again. But before Sarah could step out, a distant rumble rolled across the desert engines, the sound of heavy wheels grinding over sand, headlights flashing far away on the horizon. The raiders were returning. Lyra gasped, her voice trembling. "They're coming back. They'll kill us." Sarah's claws dug into the sand as she pulled her sister behind her, her body shaking, her eyes darting toward the human. The man looked at the approaching lights, then at the sisters, his jaw tight, his voice sharp. "We have to move, now." He pushed the cage door wide and pulled both of them out, his grip strong but not unkind. Lyra stumbled, her legs weak, but he lifted her easily, placing her on his back as if she weighed nothing. Sarah ran beside him, her breath ragged, her body aching, but her spirit alive with a fire she thought long dead. Behind them, the engines roared louder, the lights cutting across the dunes, shadows chasing them like predators. The human moved with speed, his boots pounding against the earth, his rifle bouncing on his shoulder, his pack slamming against his back. Sarah heard shouts carried by the wind, the cruel voices of their captors, the ones who had left them to die. Her heart raced, fear clawing at her. But every time she looked at the man carrying her sister, she felt something new, not fear, not despair, but a thin thread of trust. Trust in the footsteps that echoed strong against the dust. The night stretched wide before them, stars glowing faint in the black sky. Each step forward was a step away from death, a step closer to freedom. Sarah looked back one last time, the cage shrinking in the distance, the headlights growing closer. Her eyes narrowed, her claws curled tight, her heart whispering one vow. She would never return to that prison, never again, not while this human still stood beside them. The desert night wrapped them in shadows, the stars faint above as the human pushed forward with steady steps. His breath was heavy, his arms strong. Carrying Lyra across the dunes as if she were no burden at all, Sarah ran beside him, her claws digging into the sand, her chest burning, but her spirit refusing to break. Behind them, the roar of engines grew louder, headlights slicing across the night, chasing them like wild beasts. The man finally stopped near a cluster of jagged rocks. Setting Lyra down gently against the stone, he scanned the horizon, his sharp eyes calculating the distance of the raiders, the speed of their approach. Sarah panted, her body trembling from exhaustion. Yet she stood tall, shielding Lyra with her thin frame. The human turned to them, his voice firm, low. "Stay here, do not move." Sarah's golden eyes narrowed, suspicion still clinging to her. "Why would you help us? Why risk your life for strangers?" The man's jaw tightened, his gaze fixed on the approaching lights. "Because you should not die in chains." "No one should." The word struck her like a blade, simple yet heavier than the bars that once held her. She had seen humans enslave, conquer, destroy. Yet this one spoke as if their lives mattered. The engines roared closer, dust clouds rising in the distance, voices shouting, laughter carrying through the wind. The man pulled the rifle from his shoulder, checked its chamber, and crouched low behind the rocks. Sarah stared at him, her mind torn between fear and disbelief. "You cannot fight them all," she whispered. He glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Maybe not. But I can buy you time," Lyra whimpered, clutching her sister's arm, her voice small. "He will die, Sarah." "They will kill him." Sarah's throat tightened, her claws trembling, torn between running and staying, between distrust and something she had almost forgotten. Hope. The man placed the rifle barrel on the stone, his steady hands moving with experience. His breathing calm. For a moment, silence hung heavy, broken only by the beating of 3 hearts pressed against fate. The first raider truck appeared over the dune, its lights blinding, its engine howling like a beast of war. The man fired, the crack of the rifle tearing through the night, the bullet shattering the glass of the headlight. The truck swerved, sand sprang as it crashed sideways, the voices inside screaming in rage. The second vehicle roared behind, guns flashing as fire lit the dark, bullets cutting through sand and stone. Sarah pulled Lyra down, shielding her with her body, dust filling their mouths, fear clawing at their chests. But above the chaos, the man stood unshaken, firing again, each shot precise, each step forward controlled. The raiders shouted curses, their weapons blazing. Yet the human moved with strange calm, not like a conqueror, not like a raider, but like someone who had already decided his fate. Sarah's eyes widened as she watched, torn between awe and terror. The human was outnumbered, outgunned. Yet he stood his ground as if the desert itself obeyed him. He shouted without looking back, his voice like thunder. "When I say run, you run and do not stop." Her heart twisted, because she realized what his choice meant. He was ready to die so that they might live. The first raider leapt from the wreckage, snarling, his blade glowing faint in the starlight. The man dropped his rifle and pulled a short blade from his belt, meeting the raider in a clash of sparks. The sound of steel rang across the dunes, the man's movements sharp, his strikes fast. The raider fell, the sand drinking his blood, the desert echoing with silence for only a breath. Then the others shouted, more engines growling as reinforcements rushed closer. The man turned, blood streaking across his arm, his chest rising with sharp breaths. He looked back at the sisters, his eyes locking with Sarah's, and in that moment she saw no cruelty, no trick, only truth. He was fighting not for himself, but for them. Lyra clutched her sister tighter, whispering through tears, "Why is he doing this, Sarah? Why would a human care?" Sarah could not answer, her voice broken, her heart pounding, her mind unable to understand, yet unwilling to let go of what she saw. The human lifted his rifle again, aiming at the last truck racing toward them. His voice cut through the night, sharp and commanding. "Run!" Sarah hesitated, her claws gripping the stone, her body torn between obedience and defiance. But then she felt Lyra's trembling hands, heard her frightened sobs, and she knew she could not let her sister die here. She pulled Lyra to her feet, and together they ran into the night, their legs weak but their spirits burning. Behind them, the echoes of gunfire shook the desert, the footsteps of one human holding back death itself. The desert night grew colder, the stars above sharp and bright. Yet the fire of pursuit burned hotter behind them. Engines roared closer, headlights cutting across the dunes like hunting beasts, voices rising with cruel laughter carried by the wind. The human pushed forward, his breath harsh, his step strong, Sarah stumbling beside him while Lyra clung to his back, her small arms gripping his shoulders. Every sound of the machines reminded Sarah of the cage, of chains biting into her skin, of hopeless nights when freedom was only a dream, and she knew if they were caught, there would be no mercy this time. They reached the shadow of a broken ridge, jagged rocks jutting from the sand like the bones of giants. The human pulled them into the narrow path between stone walls, his voice urgent but steady. Quiet. Follow me. The sisters obeyed, hearts pounding, their alien ears twitching at every sound of pursuit. Behind them, lights swept the dunes, beams of white tearing across the night. Searching, hunting, drawing closer. The ridge offered cover, but the path ended at a rusted gate half buried in sand. Old chains held it closed, thick links corroded yet strong. The human cursed under his breath, his eyes darting. Then he pulled out his crowbar again. He slammed it against the lock, sparks flying. The sound ringing loud in the stillness, Sarah flinched, fear rising. They will hear us, she whispered sharply. Clutching Lyra's hand, the human did not stop. His muscles straining, his jaw tight. We do not have a choice. The metal groaned, resisted, then cracked, a shower of rust falling as the chain snapped. The gate creaked open, loud like thunder in the night. The sound carrying across the desert? Lyra gasped, pointing with a trembling hand. They're coming, I see the lights. Indeed. Beams swept closer, voices shouting in the distance, engines growling like hungry predators. The human grabbed both sisters and shoved them through the gate. His voice urgent. Run, deeper inside. Beyond the gate lay an abandoned mining tunnel, dark and cold, stretching into the earth like the mouth of a beast. Fear battled with hope inside Sarah's chest. Yet she obeyed, pulling Lyra with her into the darkness. The human followed, closing the gate behind them as best he could. Shadows swallowing them whole inside. The tunnel smelled of dust and stone, the air dry, the silence heavy except for their breaths. Faint light from outside spilled across the entrance, growing brighter as vehicles stopped nearby. The raiders had arrived, their boots hit the sand, their voices sharp with anger, their language filled with curses. Sarah's claws dug into the stone wall, her heart thundering. Lyra pressed against her side, trembling, her golden eyes glowing faint in the dark. The human crouched, rifle in his hands, his body still, his eyes fixed on the faint light outside. The raiders shouted, kicking the broken gate, chains rattling. Their laughter echoed cruelly as they spotted the open path. One voice rose louder than the rest, filled with rage. Find them, drag them out. No one escapes us. The sound of boots entered the tunnel. Heavy and echoing, the human raised a finger to his lips. Signaling silence, the sisters held their breath. The tunnel growing colder, shadows pressing tighter. Sarah's mind screamed with fear, but her eyes never left the man crouched before them. He was calm, steady, his rifle steady in his hands, his body a shield between them and death. The footsteps grew closer, voices sneering, flashlights cutting thin beams into the darkness. The human leaned closer to the sisters, whispering low, "Stay behind me, no matter what." Then, without another word, he moved forward into the dark like a shadow ready to strike. The raiders' laughter filled the tunnel, mocking, certain of their prey. But they did not know what waited for them in the black. They did not know that mercy and steel had taken shape in a human form. The first shot rang out loud and sharp, echoing through the stone like thunder. Sarah flinched, clutching Lyra, but she forced herself not to scream. The sound of bodies falling followed, shouts of panic rising, another shot, then another, the tunnel exploding with sound, smoke, and sparks. The raiders' cruel laughter turned into screams, confusion breaking their hunt. The human moved like a storm, each step sure, each shot precise. The sisters could only watch shadows dance in flashes of light, their ears ringing with the thunder of battle. Hope and fear tangled inside them, twisting like fire in their veins. Then silence fell, only the sound of smoke drifting, the faint drip of water on stone. The human stood in the dark, his chest heaving, his rifle lowered, his figure lit only by the dim glow of a fallen flashlight. Sarah's heart pounded as he turned toward them, his voice low but firm. "It's not over, more will come. We must go deeper." The sisters clung to each other, fear still strong, yet their eyes followed him without question. For in that moment they knew, this human was not just a traveler, he was their only chance. The tunnel stretched deep into the earth, cold and damp, the air heavy with the smell of rust and stone. Sarah held Lyra's hand tightly as they followed the human, his tall shadow leading them through the darkness. Behind them, the night outside exploded with angry voices and the roar of more engines. The raiders had not given up. They were swarming like wolves, their footsteps echoing into the cave. The human moved quickly, his rifle ready, his pack bouncing against his back, every movement sharp and certain. He glanced over his shoulder once, his eyes narrowing, his voice low. "Keep moving. Don't stop." Sarah nodded, her chest burning with fear and exhaustion. But her legs obeyed. Lyra stumbled off and weak and trembling. Yet the human reached down and lifted her into his arms without slowing, carrying her as if she weighed nothing. Deeper they went, the tunnel twisting, splitting into narrow paths. Their footsteps echoed, their breaths harsh. From behind came the clatter of boots and the harsh beams of flashlights swinging wildly against the walls. Voices shouted closer now, cruel laughter mixing with curses. The hunters were closing in. Sarah's claws scraped against the wall as she struggled to keep up. Her mind screaming with terror. Every sound reminded her of chains, of nights in the cage, of the hopeless waiting for death. But every time she looked at the human, steady, relentless, carrying her sister with such care, a spark of something else lit within her chest. Hope, fragile yet alive. The tunnel opened suddenly into a vast chamber. The ceiling high and broken, old mining machines rusting in silence, pipes hung like dead vines, pools of dark water reflecting the weak light of the stars from a crack above. The human slowed, scanning the shadows, then motioned them toward the far side where another path waited. But before they reached it, voices spilled into the chamber, lights flashing as raiders poured in from the tunnel they had left behind. Sarah froze, pulling Lyra close, fear choking her throat. The raiders spread out, their weapons raised, their laughter cruel, their eyes hungry for pain. One of them shouted, "Run all you want, little animals, but you belong to us." Another raised his gun and fired, the bullet sparking against stone, the sound like thunder in the chamber. The human shoved the sisters behind a broken machine, his body shielding them, his voice sharp. "Stay down." Then he stepped out, rifle lifted, his movements fast and sure. Gunfire cracked, flashes of light tearing the dark. The man fired back, each shot precise, dropping raiders one after another, his body moving with the deadly rhythm of survival. Sarah clutched Lyra, her heart pounding, her ears ringing with every blast. She wanted to scream, to run, but her body would not move. Instead, she watched in awe as the human fought alone against many, his will unbroken, his strength unmatched. The raiders cursed, shouting in rage, some retreating behind cover, others charging forward with blades. But the human did not falter, his fists striking, his rifle slamming, his every move filled with fire. The battle raged, the chamber shaking with sound, dust falling from the cracked ceiling above. Sarah's breath came in gasps, her mind torn between terror and wonder. Never had she seen one fight for her. Never had she seen a human choose to bleed for strangers. The world she knew of cruelty, of cages, of despair, was breaking apart in the fire of gunpowder and grit. At last, silence fell again, broken only by the hiss of dying flames from a shattered lantern. The raiders lay scattered, their bodies twisted in defeat. The survivors fleeing back into the tunnels with screams of rage. The human staggered, blood on his arm, his chest rising and falling in heavy breaths. Yet his eyes still burned with fire as he turned to the sisters. Sarah rushed forward, fear and relief mixing. "You're hurt," she whispered, her claws trembling as she reached for him. But he shook his head, lifting Lyra gently back into her arms, his voice steady though weak. "We can't stop, more will come. We must keep moving." The sisters nodded, their hearts pounding, their trust in him growing with every step. They followed him once more, deeper into the unknown tunnels, their shadows long against the walls. Behind them, the chamber fell silent, only echoes of battle drifting away. Ahead of them, darkness waited, filled with danger, but also with a fragile promise, for though death hunted them in the dust, the sound of human footsteps still led the way. The tunnels stretched deeper, twisting like the veins of the earth, their walls damp and cold, their echoes heavy with every step. The human led the way, his rifle gripped tight, his eyes sharp in the darkness. Behind him, Sarah clutched Lyra's hand, their breath shaky, their hearts racing with every sound that followed from behind. The raiders were not finished. Their voices carried through the stone, harsh and cruel, their flashlights sweeping through the black like hungry eyes. The human stopped suddenly, raising a hand. His body still, Sarah froze, pulling Lyra close, her golden eyes wide with fear. From deeper inside the tunnel came the sound of movement, heavy boots striking stone. Another group of raiders had entered from the far side. They were trapped between two fires. Sarah's chest tightened, her claws digging into her own skin. "We can't escape," she whispered, her voice trembling. The human turned, his face lit faintly by the dim glow of his rifle's scope, his voice steady. "We can fight," Lyra whimpered, pressing her face into her sister's shoulder, her small body shaking. Sarah's eyes burned with both fear and defiance. Fight against so many. The human gave a thin, hard smile. I've fought worse. The raiders came closer, their laughter filling the tunnels. Their weapons clattering, the human crouched low, choosing a spot where the tunnel narrowed. Stone walls pressing close, a choke point. He pushed the sisters behind a collapsed pile of rocks. His voice urgent but calm. Stay hidden, do not move until I tell you. Sarah wanted to argue, to demand he not stand alone, but the fire in his eyes silenced her. She held Lyra tight, pulling her into the shadows, her heart pounding with helpless fear. Then the storm began. Gunfire cracked, deafening in the stone chamber. Flashes of light tearing the dark. The human fired first, his shots sharp and precise, each one striking with deadly aim. Raiders fell, their screams filling the tunnels, but more surged forward. Their rage growing, grenades clattered. Explosions shook the walls, dust and stone raining down. The sisters covered their heads, trembling, their ears ringing with the thunder of battle. Through the haze, the human moved like a phantom, never still, his rifle blazing, his fists striking when enemies came too close. Blood streaked his arm, his breathing harsh. Yet his will burned stronger with each passing moment. He shouted once, his voice cutting through the chaos. Run if you value life, leave them be. But the raiders laughed cruelly, their leader stepping forward, a massive figure with scars across his face, his weapon glowing red with strange energy. You think you can steal from us, human? You will die slow. The leader fired, the blast ripping through stone, the shockwave slamming against the walls. The human stumbled, his shoulder bleeding, yet he did not fall. He braced himself, lifting his rifle once more. His eyes blazing with fury, Sarah gasped, her claws digging into the rocks, fear and awe mixing as she saw him stand unbroken against impossible odds. The battle raged on, minutes stretching like eternity, the tunnels filled with smoke and screams. Every shot shook Sarah's soul, every cry of pain cut through her heart. Yet still she could not look away. She had never seen such defiance, such raw strength, such refusal to surrender. This man, a stranger, a human, was carving hope from the jaws of death. At last the chamber grew silent again, the echoes fading. Smoke drifted through the air, broken only by the crackle of fire from fallen weapons. Bodies lay scattered, raiders groaning, defeated, their leader fallen in the dust. The human stood at the center, his chest heaving, his rifle lowered, blood staining his side. Sarah rushed from her hiding place, Lyra clinging to her, her voice breaking. You're hurt, you'll die. The man shook his head, though his face was pale, his voice steady. Not yet. There's still a way out. He knelt in front of them, his gaze meeting theirs, fierce and unshaken. You're safe as long as I breathe. You're safe. Lyra began to cry softly, her small hands reaching to touch his. Sarah's eyes filled with tears she could not hold back, her heart torn by the sight of him bleeding yet standing for them. For the first time in her life, she believed that not all humans were cruel. For the first time, she believed that survival was more than a dream. The human rose again, staggering but unbroken, his steps echoing strong against the dust. He motioned toward the far side of the tunnel, where faint light spilled through cracks in the stone. Their path forward waited, dangerous and uncertain, yet filled with hope. And so, with the sound of pursuit fading behind them, the sisters followed, their trust in him unshakable. For though death had hunted them, tonight it was the human who had chosen to stand, and in his defiance they found life. The tunnel grew wider as they walked, the faint light ahead turning brighter with every step. The air smelled of dust and freedom. Carrying the promise of an exit, the human moved slowly, his hand pressed against his bleeding side, yet his shoulders remained straight, his steps steady. Sarah walked beside him, one hand gripping her sister, the other ready to catch him if he stumbled. Lyra clung tightly, her small golden eyes filled with both fear and awe, watching the man who had carried her from the cage to this moment. Behind them, the echoes of pursuit grew distant. Fading into silence, the raiders were broken, scattered, their leader dead, their will crushed by the human's defiance. But Sarah knew they would not stop forever. More would come. More chains would wait, unless they found a true way out. Her chest tightened as she looked at the man, his face pale, sweat dripping, blood soaking his shirt. She wanted to speak, to thank him, to ask why he risked his life for them, yet the words tangled inside her throat. At last they reached the end of the tunnel, A wide crack opening to the surface, the moonlight spilled down like silver fire, painting the sand dunes in soft glow. The sisters gasped, their eyes wide. The stars above stretching endless and beautiful. For the first time since the cage, the sky did not feel like a curse, it felt like a promise. The human leaned against the stone, his breathing harsh, his voice low. You're free now, no chains, no cage. The desert is yours to cross, Sarah shook her head. Her voice sharp with emotion. Not without you. You saved us, you bled for us, we will not leave you here. Lyra's small hand reached for his. Her voice soft. Please come with us, don't leave. The man looked at them, his eyes shadowed by pain yet burning with something deeper. He gave a faint smile. I promised you safety, and I keep my promises, but you must live even if I fall. Sarah felt her heart twist. Rage and sorrow mixing. No, we live together. Or we don't live at all. The human stared at her, silent for a long moment, then gave a small nod, as if her words had struck something deep inside him. He straightened again, every movement heavy with effort, but his eyes fixed on the horizon. There's a settlement east of here. Not far, if we move before dawn we can reach it, he said, his voice firm despite the pain. So they walked step by step across the silver desert, the human's footprints deep and heavy, the sisters lighter but steady beside his. Every gust of wind felt like a test, every shadow a threat, yet they kept moving. Sarah never let go of Lyra, and Lyra never let go of the human's hand. Together they formed a fragile chain, not of iron but of trust. Hours passed, the moon sinking, the horizon glowing with the first breath of dawn. The human staggered often, his wound slowing him, yet each time he faltered. Sarah took his arm, holding him up. Lyra whispered softly to him, her small voice carrying hope. Just a little more, you promised, you must keep your promise. The man gave a faint laugh through his pain. You sound like your sister, finally. As the sun rose, painting the sky with fire, they saw it, a cluster of shelters, smoke rising from chimneys. The outline of life in the distance, the settlement. Sarah's breath caught, tears filling her eyes. Lyra gasped with joy, her face glowing in the morning light. The human gave a tired smile, his eyes closing for a moment as if in relief. They reached the edge as people came rushing out, drawn by the sight of strangers stumbling from the desert. The human collapsed to his knees, his strength finally breaking. Sarah cried out, dropping beside him, her claws trembling as she tried to lift him. Stay with us, she begged. Don't leave now. Not after all this, Lyra clung to his arm, tears streaming. You can't go. You saved us. You must live. The people of the settlement rushed forward, voices urgent, hands lifting the human, carrying him toward safety. The sisters followed close, refusing to let go. For the first time, they were not prisoners. Not prey, not broken, they were survivors, walking into a future shaped not by chains but by the footsteps of one human who chose mercy. As the sun climbed higher, burning away the dust of the night, Sarah looked down at Lyra. Her sister smiled through tears, whispering softly, We are free. Sarah nodded, her heart swelling with something she had thought lost forever. Yes, we are free, and we are not alone anymore. And as the desert stretched endless behind them, they knew the sound of human footsteps would echo in their hearts forever.